younger writers may be able to relate to this even today, is that if you're really somebody who's devoted to all this, you're kind of an outcast at the same time, at least socially. I know I was, other kids my age weren't running around and getting dirty in train yards and crawling around tunnels and all that. So you become kind of like this outcast, and the only people that really understand you and what you're doing are the other people that are doing it too. So in that way, I feel like, I missed out on certain things because that's, like I said, graffiti was my whole life. But at the same time, I wouldn't change those experiences for anything else. Hello, my name is Chris Days Ellis. We are here in my studio in the South Bronx, which I've maintained here for the last 10 years. Right now, I'm working on this painting, which is called Gem Spa. I try to kind of paint things that are quintessentially from New York and can't be found anywhere else. It was a newsstand in the East Village on St. Mark's Place that was around for decades. And I think it's important to immortalize these spaces in time because in the case of Gem Spa, it's no longer with us. It's no longer there. And, now, post-COVID, I think they couldn't keep up with the rent and it finally closed. But I would go there. I lived in the East Village in the 80s. And I would go there at least a couple of times a week. I have like really great memories of it. So I wanted to make this painting that was about something that was really a part of the neighborhood and include some of the people that were a part of it. I can find inspiration, here in the city, just kind of walking down the street. I started to notice graffiti on subway cars probably about 1975, maybe even 74. And I kind of just found it fascinating, but I didn't really know much about it or where it was coming from. Right. Each one of the tags that I saw back then as a little kid seemed to have a personality of their own. Then I went to the High School of Art and Design, which, a lot of writers went there. And I started meeting people that actually went out and painted trains and did stuff. And that's when, that's when I realized, wow, this is kind of amazing. The whole process of choosing a name that nobody else has and getting it around the city and going to train, it's like you're developing this kind of superhero personality that nobody else knows about, and your alter ego is, you're like a student somewhere or somebody's kid, but your alter ego is you're also, bam, whatever your name is. And it's not an exaggeration in saying that it became my whole life. It took a while before I felt really comfortable with what I was doing, and before I really figured out what it was all about and what you had to do to be successful at it. I painted with a lot of people in my time. People like, of course, Crash, Is the Wiz, Dez, Knack 143, Cause 207, Dondi, Zephyr. It was a pretty long list of people that I eventually got to paint with. Some of those people, unfortunately, are not with us. And I feel like I'm continuing the legacy of what they left behind and trying to help people not to forget about them, because they were important parts of the history of the whole culture. I look back at those times, but I'm not stuck in those times. Yeah, totally. I look forward as well. It's like this brand here, Red Devil. It's in really good condition, but that's like the oldest one. Yeah, it's really good condition. But also maybe this Sapelin is really old. Here's another brand, Red Devil, Battleship Gray.
What years are we talking?
This is probably like 76, 75. Yeah, you don't want to be inhaling this stuff. Oh yeah, the factory here is there, Mount Vernon. Wow. These I stole. And then there's this Krylon, not a paper label, but this is pretty old, baby blue. Yeah, you can't use this anymore. Here's another pastel yellow. Yeah, this is pretty old. Yeah, and then there's some other old weird brands like Illinois Bronze. This is some weird brand I found. Oh, I don't even know what this is. Broma, Minute Dry Sedate. Yeah, this weird stuff. I would say that my experiences painting trains in the mid-70s and early 80s really inform my studio practice to this day. And even when I'm painting murals, because I still paint murals and I still do work outside, you know, those experiences from back then still, you know, are in the back of my mind, you know, because I was more or less trained to work quickly with limited light capabilities and not being able to kind of stand back and look at and admire and spend too much time looking at your work, you know. But also, even beyond that, I find that like if I'm working on a studio painting here, you know, that has nothing to do with graffiti at all, the way that I choose colors and work with colors was really informed by those graffiti experiences. So this room here is kind of like my brain, and it's where I spend the most amount of time. It's real nice for me where I can look at all these photographs, which are my reference material, and just draw, you know, just peacefully kind of work on something. Yeah, I do a lot of thinking in this room. About 99% of the images on this wall is photos that I took, because photography is also kind of a part of my practice as well. Well, I always did it. I did it in school, and then when I can afford a better camera, and then it started to be more important to me. Back in the day, I spent hours and hours on elevated subway stations trying to photograph my own work on the sides of subway cars. And that took like hours to do, and but it was exciting, you know, I'd see other people's things, and, you know, maybe run into somebody. So I got some tip that this photographer from Sweden wanted somebody to take her up to the elevated station at 125th Street and Broadway and to shoot, you know, some subway graffiti for an article that they were working on. We go up there and maybe 1 or 2 trains go by, and then boom, a brand new piece that I had done, a whole car rolled up, and I just kind of was in front of it kind of posing, but it was like a perfect moment, because that's the type of thing that never ever happens at all, where you're just up there for 2 trains and then all of a sudden your whole car rolls up with the windows and everything painted and you're in front of it. So that was an incredible moment for me. There was a certain point where, you know, I realized that people around the world are interested in this kind of New York culture that's happening at this minute. And, you know, it kind of amazed me that, because I never really started out thinking that anyone else would be interested in it at all. It still kind of amazes me that people are interested in it. I don't know, I think in some ways, like, when I look at graph now, there's some heads that really pop out and I really noticed them. You know, I gotta give him credit, because it could be something like, wow, that guy painted this high spot. How did he even get up there? Or how did even that person have access to it? Or this person's just all over the city. Like, it's incredible. But then there's others that I feel like, you know, that have just regressed, you know. And then there's also people that are doing these kind of like burner style pieces that have this complexity to it that, you know, I think that's equally as incredible. At a certain point, you know, being a writer, I was starting to become an adult, because it really is a young person's game. And the more I was faced with those responsibilities, the less time I had for writing. You know, I had to make a living, find some place to live, and I had those kind of concerns, holding down a job, and you know, I also was smart enough to know that, you know, the generation that I was a part of was sort of moving on, and then right behind us, another generation was kind of rising up, and it was their time, you know, and it was time for those guys to get their light. So, you know, I kind of allowed that evolution to take place and didn't really fight it at all. There was definitely a transition, but I would say that it was more of an evolution. And I would say that I never made this clear-cut decision to, like, you know, I'm going to stop writing feed. I'm going to only do things in my studio. It was more gradual, and there was a period when I did both until I couldn't really do both, you know. So it was definitely a more of a gradual evolution that had happened, you know. But I never kind of really, I never put it out of mind completely. Even when I wasn't painting, I was still drawing outlines in my book, and I was still always connected to it, still looking at it, because I wanted to be aware of, like, the younger guys that were coming up at that time and what they were doing. So, yeah, I mean, it's never completely out of your mind, you know, and it's very hard to sort of dismiss it like that.